I would like to go ahead and introduce today's presenter. We have Beth Christ, who is my colleague here at the Colorado State Library, and she is our Youth and Family Services.
Thanks, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope this will be a useful session to you. Please do continue to introduce yourself in the chat area. So far, I think we have a nice and geographic lineup here. I know we have Iowa, Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and Massachusetts. So that's great. So yeah, if you feel inclined, please do introduce yourself. I'd also be curious to know if you're from what type of library you're from, public, school, or academic. So that would be interesting as well. So yeah, we're going to get started talking about this really important topic here. And as Christine mentioned, we do want this to be interactive, so there'll be time throughout this hour for you to exchange your own ideas and experiences. We definitely want to hear from you. This is not going to be a lecture. Thank you. Great. This is great. Everyone's introducing themselves here. Super. Strong showing from the East Coast. Thanks. So we're going to get started out looking at these statistics. This is from the Pew Research Center, their Libraries 2016 report. And this isn't the whole table, but these are just some stats I pulled out on their findings from a survey they did in 2016 of people who have never visited a library or a bookmobile. So you can see here the results. And I know you're busy introducing yourselves, which is fantastic. Thank you. Please keep doing that. But also, if you would type in any thoughts that you have upon seeing these. I know some of you, of course, might have seen them already, but is this surprising to you, these demographics of people who have never visited a library or bookmobile? Is this pretty much what you suspected or already knew? Or just any thoughts you have on these steps. And I'll give you a moment to write here in the chat. And I will mention too that we have a handout that's available with the resources that I'll be sharing during this presentation. And it includes this, the link to this, so you don't need to worry about trying to copy this down if you're interested in looking at this further. This survey has a ton more information in it. Again, I just pulled out this little bit here for this. So some of you are saying that the numbers are higher than you expected. Nina, that's a good insight. Higher than I'd like to see, but not surprised. Yep. Very surprised by the 30,000 number. And thanks, Christine. Christine has shared the handout. So this handout just has, again, resources that I will share during the session, and also additional ones in case you're interested in exploring the topic of removing barriers in your library. So definitely check that out if you want more information. Okay, well, I found these stats to be very eye-opening. And so this is what we're going to explore during this session. And not only, so this is the really stark ones, the people who have never visited a library or bookmobile. But also in this, I want to explore too people that may use the library but not frequently or not as fully as they could or might wish to for various reasons. So even though I'm starting with this pretty specific statistical information, definitely do think a little broader about it as we go. And so we're just going to jump right into brainstorming here. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to pull up two chat windows. You can chat just like you were chatting in the main chat, but if you could answer these questions, we're just going to get you started right away thinking about what barriers might exist at your library in the left-hand chat window. And how might you find out more about these barriers that people could have to using your library? And really, as you ponder these two questions, think broadly across all of your library services and spaces. So really think think broadly. Language, Trina says language, absolutely. That is a huge one. Paid parking, yes. As a user of an urban library, yes, definitely. And Christine mentions people don't even know the library exists. Transportation is a huge one. Knowing what's available, yes. Societal expectations about appearance, personal hygiene, definitely. Hours, these are so great. Location that's not central, staff attitudes, definitely. Rural areas and transportation. Feeling that the library may not be for me, that's a great one. Yeah, Trina, a lot of people don't know that our services are free. And they're not open long enough, Deborah, absolutely. Wow, Betsy, that's a great issue to address is mobility issues, definitely. Fines and fees, Ashlyn, thank you. That's one a topic near and dear to my heart. And there are several resources on the handout specifically about eliminating fines and fees. So thank you for bringing that up. Karen, adequate parking, yeah, definitely. And Beth, just not enough resources. That's definitely a perennial problem, right? Oh, so Jerry is at a campus environment. That's great, and not always welcoming to the general public. Great, thank you. Very insightful. And these are great barriers. Does anyone want to jump in on the chat to the right and brainstorm on how you might find out more about those barriers that people have and how you might overcome them? Yeah, Erin, get out of the library and talk to people. Surveys, ask, outreach, excellent. Yeah, super. And Karen, on the back to the barriers side of things, clear and helpful signage is always needed. You are so right about that. Yeah, those of you from Hopkinton Library, look at statistics and compare to who's actually using the library, right? Just get out and find out who is using and who is not using your library. Partnerships, Janice, absolutely. Always look for partnerships. Yep, a couple of you are saying partnerships now. Absolutely, definitely. Neighborhood groups, businesses, community groups. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. You are all obviously in the mindset here of this. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint. Thank you for. I just like to jump in and do that right off the bat. And here are some ways that you can think about looking for barriers, places to look for barriers. And I think you hit actually on most of these. The space itself. Surely your library is ADA compliant. How could you make it even more accessible to people with all sorts of physical challenges? And just making the space welcoming as well. So perhaps you do have signage in languages more than English that are common in your community. That is definitely a way to make your space more welcoming. Make sure that people know your space is welcoming to babies and toddlers who might make a lot of noise, but we definitely want them there. Policies, someone mentioned fines and fees, and I see Judy, my partner in crime, is on this webinar too. Fines and fees are a huge barrier to many people to use your library. So there are other policies as well. Perhaps you have a policy on people bringing in large bags or backpacks. but that could be a barrier for some people who may be experiencing homelessness, for instance. So definitely address policies to see what kind of barriers they might be, they might have for some people. Customer service, a lot of you mentioned this, which is fantastic. Definitely as welcoming as you can be to everyone, all your patrons and your people who aren't patrons as well. You want to make sure that everyone in the community knows they are welcome at your library. Collections, again, we mentioned language, and a lot of formats too. You can definitely make your collections, or you can remove barriers from your collections by having them in a lot of formats, including audiobooks, large print, ebooks, magazines, all sorts of, graphic novels are great too. So a lot of ways you can make your collections more accessible. Staff training certainly goes along with everything. And programs and outreach services, again, making them more accessible, perhaps bringing them out into the community more than you do, into places where people are likely to go, and at times when they're likely to be there. And we've had more here. Christine mentions our library website's accessible, which is great. Yes, definitely make sure that all of your online resources are accessible too. That's an excellent point. And assistive devices for sensory impairments. Lots of charging stations, definitely. That's a great one. Christine says, examine when you have to say no, are there barriers that can be addressed? Yeah, these are great. So I'm going to take you through just one way of looking at how to get rid of barriers, how to find and get rid of barriers. And so I will mention up front that I am coming from a youth services background, so many of the examples I'm using today are from that youth services bent, but please think broadly when I'm going through these examples across all of your library services, definitely. So I've organized this in a way where to give examples. So we're first going to look at a very specific barrier. So this is a barrier that one audience has. And here's an example. This is from actually the Sacramento Public Library. One of their teen librarians noticed that they have these great resources in the library for teens around different self-help books and reference sources on sensitive topics, but teens would rarely ask for them. And this librarian said, well, duh, of course they're not asking. It's extremely uncomfortable for many teens to come up to a librarian who may be a complete stranger and say, I need a resource on pregnancy, or STDs, or homelessness, domestic violence, right? These are extremely sensitive topics. And there's a lot of stigma around some of these, and so it can be very, very embarrassing and very traumatizing even for a teen to come up to a librarian and ask for resources. So this is something that this librarian noticed, and this was his solution. He created these bookmarks and posters of tough topics. So he posts these up in the teen section, and he has the bookmarks in discrete places so that a teen can just discreetly take the bookmark and see on it where, where the Dewey Decibel number is, and can go find the material on his or her own, which is tremendous, right? This is removing that barrier of the stigma and the embarrassment of talking to someone, which is all too common. And so this one wasn't the original one from the Sacramento Public Library, but I like this one because on the back of the bookmark here, they've added additional resources outside of the library. And so on that handout, we have there's someone who has created these where you can just print them out on your own. So that's nice. Or you could customize it and print it out. But I just thought this was a great idea, and it does remove that barrier of a teen, having to reach out and ask if they're not familiar with the Dewey Decimal System. And this was created for teens, but how great would this be for adults too, right? I mean, this is hard to go up to someone and and say, I'm looking for resources on rape. That can be so traumatizing. And so if you just have this up discreetly in a poster and or bookmark, and then people can just find it on their own. Yeah, I love it too. And Christine does, yeah, that's a great question, Christine. Do any of your libraries do something similar? Or is this something that you would consider? Great. So at the Hopkinton Library, you have flyers about some of these issues. That's great too. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna wait for some more typing here, and then we'll go on to our next example. Oh, okay. So that is an example of, again, one audience with one specific barrier. And again, these are people who are obviously in the library, but they have a barrier to fully using the library and really meeting their needs when they came in the library. So here's the next example. If you take one specific audience who might have multiple barriers. And for this example, we're going to look at families with kids on the autism spectrum. And I have some statistics here as we go. But this is so true. And so our example here is going to be the Longmont Public Library in Colorado, who's been doing tremendous work in this arena. And so they found that 80% of parents with kids on the autism spectrum had not been to the library in 5 years or not at all since their child was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And so they went and talked to these families and said, why aren't you coming to the library? What can we do to meet your needs so you will come back to the library? And they said they feel unwelcome, they feel judged, they feel just generally on display in public venues, not necessarily the library, but just in general. And this is because sometimes their kids have some atypical behaviors and appearances. And they thought that too often the patrons and sometimes the staff judge the kids and families because their disabilities are less obvious than people in a wheelchair. And libraries can be especially difficult to navigate for kids on the autism spectrum because it is perceived to be so quiet, such a quiet place. Disruptive people are not welcome, especially disruptive kids. So these are multiple barriers, right? They have space barriers, they have customer service barriers, they have perception barriers. There are a lot of issues going on here. Staff training, right? The staff could use some more training on this. So what they did is they came up with a multi-pronged approach to this. So one thing they do is they've created these little cubby spaces in the library where kids on the autism spectrum often feel a little safer to sit in there and read on their own. The link on the bottom, they have special access browsing. So they have after-hours events that are just for families with special needs. And so these families are welcome. They know it's a safe place during this time that they will be with other families with kids on the autism spectrum. And they also heard from a nearby nonprofit that there is need in the Spanish community for this as well. So they now do these after-hour events with bilingual staff too. So they're serving another audience, and then they have They received some grant funds that allowed them to purchase items like noise-canceling headphones, developmentally appropriate toys, and iPads with special apps that will help these kids. And then they were approached by a local robotics company who had been doing some research on robotics that can help kids on the autism spectrum function. And so they approached the library staff and said, we would like to build robots to put in your library. And they actually worked with teens on the autism spectrum to develop these. And here's one of them. You can see here on the top right. His name is Bibli, and he lives in the library. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but right here, there's a little screen that the kids can manipulate with different information and games on there. And sometimes these kids can just relate better to the robots and help them navigate the library and make them feel more comfortable there. So you can see they have put in many approaches, and it has worked great. Now they have a lot of families, even from neighboring communities, coming in to use the library with their kids on the autism spectrum. So really interesting approach to a multi-pronged problem. And now we're going to look at another example of one audience that faces multiple barriers to using the library. This is families in low-income households who are often unable to come to the library often or use it fully. So for this, the Colorado State Library here in Denver did a we received a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services called SPELL, Supporting Parents in Early Literacy Through Libraries. And to find out what barriers parents face, parents in low-income households specifically face to using the library fully, we did surveys and focus groups. And you can see here their main barriers to library use. And again, none of this is surprising, but to get this information directly from the parents and hear it from them really was eye-opening, and now we have great documentation on this. So that was our first step in this process. Oh, and Christine posted our project website, thank you. And again, that is also on the handout that we have available for you if you want to learn more about our SPELL program. And so what we did in our first year, we did research on this with the parents themselves, finding out their barriers, and also from them the best way to overcome these barriers. And then we partnered with 8 public libraries in Colorado and gave them our key recommendations. Again, these are from the parents. So, we asked them questions like, well, what organizations do you already use a lot? Where do you find yourself? So that was our key recommendation is the really, really critical need to partner with other organizations. Definitely eliminate fines and fees. Offer age-specific book sets, because that's one of the barriers they told us was, we are really busy and we don't always know what the best books are for our 2-month-old, and we don't have time to go in and figure it out. And so, our recommendation was offer age-specific book sets that they can just come in and check out, and there might be 5 books and a CD in there, or maybe a manipulative or toy or 2, and they can just check that out and go. Again, promote that young children are welcome, and definitely provide library services where they are when they're there. That is really critical, because we heard over and over, we cannot get to the library. We are too busy. We have transportation issues. It is just not feasible. And whenever possible, schedule programs for kids, evenings and weekends, because busy working parents cannot get there if your story time is just on the weekdays. So these were some of our key recommendations. And we have at least one rep from High Plains Library District here. Judy, thanks for coming. And so I will let Christine give you some instructions on how to get to the video.
Okay, so Adobe Connect has some kind of weird things when it comes to playing videos, mainly to protect copyright. I believe if you click right on the video itself, it will open for you in another window. I am also putting it in the chat box. So we're going to kind of send everybody off to watch the video. And then when you come back, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a man that looks like he has his hand raised. If you'll just raise your hand when you're back, then we'll kind of know that everybody's had an opportunity to watch the video. So hopefully that makes sense. I think we have almost everybody back. So let's go ahead and move forward, Beth. And thank you all for participating in that video.
Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that video. I think it's a great example of, again, one of the libraries who is partnering on our SPELL program, of the way that they approached this. And again, we have 7 other excellent libraries as well who participated in the SPELL program, and they all approached it differently. But this is how they approached removing barriers for these low-income families in their community in Colorado. And so I think they were pretty creative. They were true to their community, and I think that's really a key point to removing barriers is to realize that one size does not fit all. What works for your community will not work for everyone. And so really you need to look at your own community, talk to people and say, why aren't you using the library? What barriers do you face? How can we overcome and help you meet your needs and reach your goals in life? How can we make the library more accessible to you? So that's really what it's like. And this was just one great example of how they're doing it in northern Colorado here. And so we're going to move on to another chat after we've seen some examples. So I want you now to choose a specific audience in your community that may face barriers to using your library, such as those that we've been discussing here. And on the left, answer what barriers might they face, and on the right, how could you remove those barriers? And it would be helpful if you type in the community that you're thinking of. And this could be anything from people experiencing homelessness to people in wheelchairs. I mean, any group in your community who may be facing barriers. Just to get you thinking here of specific audiences. Great, Orlando, thank you. People with English as a second language, excellent. And what barriers might they face to using your library? That's great. Beth, immigrants, language, and familiarity with how the library works and what it offers, super. Excellent. See lots of typing going on. Here we go. Jen, mental health. Yes, and the barriers there, fear, stigma, and anger and misunderstanding, definitely. Lori, people in the regional jail, yes. It is crucial to get the library services to them, and they have an obvious barrier, right? I mean, they physically cannot get to the library, and so you have to bring library services to them. That is excellent. Judy, refugees and fear of being visible in the community. So important, especially now, definitely. And those of you from Hopkinton, the elderly folks, definitely have lots of barriers. Holly, you have 3 book clubs for adults. Some of them vision impairment, require large type. Oh, and they're hard to get through interlibrary loan. That is great. I would not have thought of that. But yeah, that's really, really insightful. Senior community immigrants. Yep. Susan mentions transportation. Transportation is really key, and it is, you often think of it rural, but it's also urban as well. It can be really hard to get to the library. Jenny mentions people with mobility and cardiovascular limitations for sure. Kids without libraries nearby. Yep. And Ashlyn too. Yep, definitely. Yeah, and your solutions here are great. Hire a diverse staff who will be able to communicate with people who live in your library service area. Definitely. And I would add communicate both in language and culturally to be culturally competent. Lori, send magazines to the jail. That's great. Ashlyn, outreach and partnership to schools. Yep. Offering home delivery or personal help finding and using materials. Oh, I like scooters in the library. That's great. Jen, yes, mental health training and trauma-informed service. Yeah, that goes back to that staff training. It really is critical. Oh, these are great. Refugees need to partner with community organizations to lobby for the library as a trustworthy organization. That's so true. Bookmobiles, yes, bookmobiles are a great solution. They are very expensive, but there are other options too. I know lots of libraries now have vans that are a little more reasonably priced to purchase and maintain. So there are options. Lots of unique delivery methods, which is fantastic. Purchasing Kindles to loan out. That's great, so that they can make the text any size. That's super. Oh, and Jenny offering feminine hygiene products. That is amazing. Yes, what a great solution. And expanding digital collections for homebound or busy patrons. Yes. Oh, these are so great. Becky mentioned she's at a public law library that's not terribly accessible to the public. Oh yeah, that's a hard one too, right? So your solution is to work with other branches to bulk up their legal collections with staff knowledge. That's excellent. And Christine says just ask for more funding, and it can be hard to ask, but if you are making your library more accessible and removing those barriers, sometimes it does take more funding for that. And she also says work with vendors to make online resources more intuitive. These are great solutions, and I love that there's so much out of the box thinking here, because sometimes that's what it takes. So, and it can be hard, it can be a hard stretch, but it's so worth it. Yeah, these will go far, these solutions. I love these solutions. This is great. And I would say we will also capture all of your chats here and all of your ideas in case you want to refer to them later, and they will be available on that CSL in Session website later. So super, thank you for the great conversation. We will go back, and so far we've been talking about specific audiences with different barriers, but now we're going to look at a different approach. So this is looking sort of across your community at multiple audiences that have multiple barriers. So when you do this, you can see what barriers that many groups have in common and focus on those. So some people might have really specific barriers kind of unique to their group, but if you can look across the community, you might be able to remove the barriers that the most number of people have to make the most impact. Obviously, this is a much more time-intensive approach, but it can also be very effective. So what would this look like? So first you would assess your community, strategize on the key barriers, and then work on how to eliminate them. So you might start with a community assessment, looking at demographic and economic data, and also current and potential partners, and most importantly, your community library users, but also definitely look at the non-users. And of course, they're a little harder to get to, but they're the most important ones that you need to talk to, actually, those people that aren't using the library regularly. And again, on the handout I keep referring to that will be on the CSL in Session website, there are several great resources for community assessments. So you can get more information on this because I'm just running through this super fast. But then we're going to look at one great example here. This is the Edmonton Public Library in Canada. And in 2014, the library conducted this really impressive, groundbreaking study to identify barriers that individuals face in accessing their basic public library services. They worked with 11 underserved communities and 174 representatives of those communities. And looking across all of the input that they gathered over several years, they identified these top 5 barriers that were preventing people from accessing and using the library services. And so this is what they're focusing on. So you can see this is a very across the community, finding the barriers that will have the most impact for the most number of people. Again, very different approach than what we've been talking about, but this is, if you want to go big, this is the way to do it. And I love the their logo and slogan here. Together, we transform communities. So you can see they're very community oriented. And you can see their whole report. It's a long, extensive report that they did on their findings from all of this input across their community. And that also, the link to that report is on your handout. Very impressive if you are interested in doing anything like that. This really is a great example from the Edmonton Public Library. And so if you're going with something like this, or even if you're just looking at trying to eliminate any kind of barriers, it can seem daunting, right? It can seem a little overwhelming. So here are some questions that you can start with. And we've kind of gone over some of these. And it really is, so so when we were starting out with the example of the bookmarks and the posters for teens about how they can find these self-help resources on their own without having to ask, that is a change that frontline staff can make pretty much. And so that is really accessible for staff to make that kind of change. The other changes, the next one where you're having, you're focusing on one audience, but they have multiple barriers that you're working to remove. That's more extensive, right? That will take the administration on down and a lot of staff training. And then, of course, the example from the Edmonton Public Library is just a whole community-wide thing. But you can also start with that, like even small changes. Even if you can start with small changes, like adding bookmarks to the teen area and on how they can find self-help books on their own, even that is removing a barrier, and that will make such a difference to many people. So even if you can start small, that's great. And if you want to start bigger, here are some questions. And so now it's time for you, if you have any questions at this point, if you have any thoughts or how you might start this process. We are finishing up a few minutes early, so please do. This is a great opportunity for you to exchange some ideas. Perhaps talk about, we'd love to know about what barriers you have already removed in your libraries or are thinking of planning to do. So please jump in on the chat. We'd love to hear from you again on what your thoughts on this.
Yeah, this is Christine, and I'd like to thank Beth, first of all, for sharing the information, and I liked kind of how it was all couched in terms of the different ways that we can think about it in terms of audience and one barrier or multiple barriers and that kind of thing. I'd be kind of curious as to what some of your aha moments were, like what might be something that you might take back to your library on this topic.
And I see some people typing, so while you're typing, I'll tell you about this photo here. This is also a library that was partnering on our SPELL program. This is the Montrose Public Library in Western Colorado. And the way that they decided to help serve low-income families is they took their bookmobile, which they already had, out to a child care center in a low-income area at pickup and drop-off times. So again, they're going there when the parents are already there at school, and people can come in the bookmobile at that point. They also eliminated fines, and they got rid of all of the existing overdue fines and fees that people already had. And they heard some amazing stories of the children. They would approach the bookmobile and they'd say, "Oh, Mom, let's go on the bookmobile." And Mom would say, "Well, we can't check out any books because we have too many fines and we can't afford to pay them," which is heartbreaking. And the librarian on the bookmobile was able to say, "No, we will waive all your fines and fees if you use the bookmobile. We want you back. We want you to use the bookmobile." And so they did, and now they are regular users at the library too. So it's stories like this, they remove that barrier of those fines and fees and the barrier of parents having to get to the library. They brought the library to them and they said, "Here it is. We want you to use it again." And it's just so heartwarming. So, and yeah, Christine says it removes the stigma as well. Absolutely. So it's stories like this, whenever you can remove a barrier, it makes such a difference in people's lives, giving them access. And so Karen shared the bookmarks. Do you like the bookmarks with location of sensitive topics? Great. I'm glad. I love that one too. I think that's brilliant. Janice asks, has anyone had success with surveying or engaging non-users? If anyone has, I'd love to know. We also have some, again, if you look on our handout, I believe we do have some in the community assessment area, some examples of how you can do that. It is hard. Again, I would say engage with your partners. If you can talk with an organization in your community who already works extensively with an audience that you're trying to target, ask them if you can survey people. Perhaps it's a WIC office. Perhaps it's a nonprofit that works with new immigrants. Deborah says they set up a survey in SurveyMonkey and posted it in social media, and it worked out very well. That's great too. Schools, certainly a great option for that too. But yeah, again, particularly if you're looking for a specific audience, you can reach out to other organizations, and social media is always great. Yeah. So great question. It is hard to reach the people that are coming to your library, right? So yeah, definitely a challenge. That would make another good CSL in session, Christine.
It would. So if you guys have any other questions or comments or success stories at all, feel free to continue sharing them in the chat area. Beth and I can stay until 1 o'clock Colorado time. I did post a brief survey in the center there. That link should work. I'll also post it in the chat, so we'd like to know what you thought about today's session. We're always looking on how we can make these sessions better. For those of you who might need a certificate for today's session, in just a second, I will put my email in the chat area and you can email me and ask for a certificate. I just can't type and talk at the same time, so hang on for just one more second, and I'll put my email in the chat if you need a certificate. Um, our next CSL in session is going to be on Tuesday, March 26th, when we have someone from the Denver Public Library who is going to facilitate a discussion on being a compassionate librarian. I think it kind of dovetails nicely into breaking down barriers, but also how can we be more compassionate in our work and also take care of ourselves will be part of that. And then starting tomorrow, we are actually starting a 3-part series on helping patrons with legal questions. So the first one will be tomorrow, same time, noon Colorado time. And then we'll have part 2 will be next month on the 27th. So let me type my email in the chat. So feel free to email me if you have if you need a certificate. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. I think we shared some great ideas. I will get the archive up on the CSL in Session website. I will also post some of the ideas that you all shared in chat. Those will be anonymous. I'll strip out the names and everything. But you all shared some great ideas. And then I'd like to thank Beth once again for sharing the information and resources on this topic with us today. So I wish everybody a really great afternoon, and let's keep removing those barriers.
Thanks, everybody.